Hello again, and let's start with the second part of this session. As I already said, this will be about the history and main characteristics of the Polish migration to the UK. So let's say a little bit more about this historical context of Polish migration to the UK and specific. So, as I already mentioned, the Polish migrants first appeared in the UK in biggest numbers as soldiers, refugees, European voluntary workers after the Second World War. Perhaps some of you have heard about the Polish soldiers who participated here in the battles during the Second World War. Try to think about the stories that maybe you're all familiar with. So some of them actually stayed here in the UK after the war because of the new regime in Poland that they found that was not democratic. That's why they decided that there was nothing really to go back to. And that's why big number of Polish people here in the UK after the Second World War. They were joined by their families, especially by their kids and wives, if they had them, in the 1950s. That was the post-war family reunification. This obviously started marriage and family network migration, and that's how this diaspora that is often called Polonia grown here in the UK. In the late 1960s, especially 1968, the Jewish migration started because of the persecution that the Jewish people were facing from the Polish communist government. 1980s saw the professional and political migration from Poland. As I already said, some of the people were members of the opposition who saw themselves obliged to leave Poland because of the persecution. Others were professionals that were looking for better work opportunities for themselves and for their families. After 1989, that is the year of the transition from the non-democratic regime in Poland to the democratic regime, is when the economic and professional migration starts. Hugely undocumented because of the migration regimes. People often didn't have visa to come here to the UK. So many of them were not documented, were working without the proper documents. They were often targeted by the Home Office in raids either to their homes here in the UK or their workplaces, and were later deported. Also, people obviously traveled by buses and not by planes because it was the tickets were not available, were very expensive. So the stories of people who were not admitted on the border and had to wait for the bus back home before crossing the English Channel were pretty common. These times of coming here to work without proper documents finished in 2004. Poland enters the European Union, and the Polish people can migrate to the UK starting 1st of May 2004. And this is when perhaps everybody could migrate, and everybody took this opportunity. Not only professionals, but also so-called low-skill workers, but also family members join their family members who had already been here. So as you will see in a bit, the numbers were significant after 2004. Let's talk a little bit more about this post-enlargement migration from Poland. Following the Polish accession to the European Union, um, the Polish people started migrating, especially to the countries that opened their labor markets. Sorry. So we are talking about three countries: UK, Ireland, and Sweden. The rest of the countries imposed so-called transition periods when they wouldn't admit the Polish workers. But we will talk about it in a bit. So, how many people migrated? The numbers are not very detailed. They're not very specific. Those are rather estimates because it's really difficult to measure migration. Why? Because obviously the borders are open, so you don't have to apply for a visa, and then you don't have these numbers of visa, for instance, from the Home Office. Yes, to come here to the UK, you have to cross the border and you have to see the border agent. But still, they do not know who comes just to visit, who comes to stay. And the same from the Polish side, where there are no systematic statistics considering the migration, because to live in Poland you have to be registered in under like a certain address, so you are registered with your local council. However, when people migrate, they often don't deregister from the place where they lived. So it's about 800,000 people who migrated from Poland to the United Kingdom, especially for economic reasons, because of the favorable, especially back then, 2004, exchange rate from pound sterling to the Polish currency, that is Polish zloty. And for how long? Who knows? Everybody migrates just for a year and then plans to go back. But these plans change as they are abroad. And this very much reflects also the strategies of Polish migrants who migrated to the United Kingdom, or perhaps we should say a lack of strategy. And this is what migration scholars have called international unpredictability, when people intend not to make plans, especially when you don't have to apply for a visa, especially when you don't have to apply for a work permit, then you don't see your stay here in the UK as a certain, very much defined period of time. People have been living here, finding jobs, sometimes getting better positions when they spoke better English. Then they had their children, and it was all within this plan of not having any plans, or what we call international unpredictability. So to finish this topic of the Polish post-enlargement migration, let's look at the countries where the Polish people migrated. So as you can see, this blue line shows the numbers of Polish migrants that migrated to the United Kingdom. The red line shows the number of people who migrated to Germany. And then we will have another important countries of the Polish migration, that is Ireland, Italy, and Holland. But when we compare all of them, Germany and the UK are the most important countries, or receiving countries, as we call it in the context of migration research. So, as you can see, the number of migrants in Germany have been historically high. If we take as the point of departure 2002, there were much more migrants in Germany than in the UK. And this owes to two reasons. First of all, some of Polish citizens had the right to work and live in Germany because of their own family links to Germany. Those who didn't had relatives and family members who did and facilitated their undocumented migration to Germany. So that's the first reason. And the second reason is the geographical proximity of Poland and Germany. Those are neighbor countries, so it's not expensive to migrate to Germany. And it's not expensive to migrate to Germany if you have your house back in Poland and decide to go and visit your family in Poland every month, for instance. So, as I said, if we take as a point of departure 2002, in Germany there was 300,000 Polish migrants, and about 30,000 Polish migrants in the UK. 2002 is the year when the migration to United Kingdom was not as easy as it was after EU accession in 2004. So let's just have a look at what happens in 2004 with the number of Polish migrants in the UK. It's skyrocketing, isn't it? And the biggest number is in, as you can see, 2007, when the peak of this migration. When we look at this initial time following the accession. Anticipating a little bit, the biggest number of Polish migrants in the UK, 2016, and this is something that we will look at the next slide. But as you can see, the United Kingdom was and still is the most important country that has received the Polish migrant following the EU accession of Poland in 2004. As I said, the biggest number of Polish migrants in the UK, slightly over 1 million, was observed in 2016, and it's over here, 2016. Let's look at this chart. This chart shows the numbers of Polish migrants, of Polish citizens in the UK from 2014 to 2018, and here I would like to draw your attention to two facts. First of all, the number when the year when the number of Polish citizens in the UK was the highest, that is, as I already said, 2016, when, according to the Home Office statistics and the statistics of here in Britain, it's slightly over 1 million. And the second thing that we would like to observe when looking at this chart is the percentage. Are the numbers of male and female migrants and how they have been changing over time. As you can see, for each year, these numbers we will have in a division for male and female Polish citizens in the UK. And as you can see, for each of them, from 2014 to 2018, females predominate. This owes to a couple of reasons. Obviously, it's important to mention that women started to follow their partners, husbands, after. So first in 2004 it was men who migrated, and a little bit after they were followed by their partners. But also it owes to the fact that in Poland it's more common for female for women to have higher education, and as you will see in a bit, it is predominantly people with higher education who migrated to Britain. When we look at the age of Polish migrants and we compare it to the age of the Polish citizens who migrated to other important destinations, you will see that following the EU accession, the people who migrated to Britain were the youngest. Here at this chart, you can see the age groups. The light blue shows age group 20 to 29 years old. The more dark blue is 30 to 39, and finally this darkest blue is 40 plus. And when we compare when we compare UK, Germany, Ireland, Italy, and USA, you will see that the people who migrated to the UK were the youngest. What about their places of origin? When we look at the same receiving countries, that is UK, Germany, Ireland, Italy, and USA, and when we look at Polish migrants following this EU accession in 2004, you will see that for the United Kingdom, the migrants predominantly came from not predominantly, but the percentage of migrants who came from cities of 100,000 inhabitants and over was considerable. Almost 30% of Polish migrants who migrated to the United Kingdom were people coming from the cities. Let's look at a chart talking about education, the level of education, something that I have already mentioned. So when we look at the levels of education of Polish migrants migrating to different destinations, you will see that that people who migrated to United Kingdom following EU accession had considerably high level of education. For Ireland, we just don't have any data for pre-2004 migration. Also, because it was not common at all. Migration to Ireland started after the EU accession. So as you will see, when we compare the proportion of Polish migrants with higher education for United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, and Holland, you will see that it's significantly higher for the UK. Almost a quarter of Polish migrants who chose UK as a destination had higher education following in this period following the EU accession. To summarize what we have seen on these charts, Polish migrants in the UK, when compared to migrants in other receiving countries, are younger, with average of 28 years old in the UK and much more 37-year-old in Germany or Italy, are also better educated. As you remember this last slide with the percentage of people with higher education that are graduates, are also more likely than people who migrated to Germany, Italy, Ireland, or United States to come from towns and cities. These people are not so likely to come from villages. Because they are younger, they lack work experience on the Polish labor market. It is very common, and especially it was very common following the EU accession, for the people to graduate from Polish colleges and universities, and just without even entering the Polish labor market, they would migrate to Britain. And they were more likely than people who migrated to Germany, Italy, or the United States to move abroad in order to develop their language and professional skills. Obviously, because they already had the higher education, but didn't have much work experience. So, as I already said, it was United Kingdom, Ireland, and Sweden that opened their labor markets immediately after 2004 enlargement for the new member states, and we're talking about eight countries, because Malta and Cyprus they already had this special treatment and access to UK labor market. Whereas other countries, all the remaining 12 EU member states imposed some transition periods, because transition periods that would last 3 to 4 years, with the record of the longest transition period in Germany and Austria, countries that had already faced big migration from the new member states, sometimes undocumented migration, and Germany and Austria, their governments were worried that they would face big numbers of migrants from the EU. From the new EU member states. So why this transition period? As you possibly already know, just to protect local labor markets from significant numbers of new workers, sometimes without language skills that would enable communication with their colleagues. So here, in the next part of this second part of the Panopto session, I would like to give you a little bit of a taste of what is the experience of the Polish migrant, and how this experience has changed before and after EU transition. Here, referring to a paper by Galasinska and Horolec, obviously all the references, all the bibliography you will have at the end of this presentation. Here I would like to say about the grand narrative of economic migration of a Polish migrant who migrates to the UK without any money, and either becomes successful in the host country or brings all his money back to Poland, where he is set up for life. Galasinska and Horolec call this the grand narrative, that is a discursive strategy of the Polish migrants, how they talk about the reasons behind their migration, and the success story of a migrant that can be successful either remaining in the host country, or can be successful going back but bringing economic resources that helps to further develop in the country of origin. So when I said about a discursive strategy, we are talking about a way of depicting something in a narrative, that is the oral speech, And this way of depicting, way of describing something is something that is repeating in the stories of the people who share some kind of experience. So here, when we are talking about this grand narrative of economic migration, that was found by the authors of this paper, Galasinska and Horowitz, were talking about the repetitive strategies that they saw in repetitive numbers of the accounts of Polish migrants. Here I would like to show you, as follows, I would like to show you two slides with two long quotations from narratives of Polish migrants that have been described and analyzed by the same authors, Galasinska and Horowitz. So the first one will be a narrative of Henryk, who migrated to Britain just before the EU accession in 2004. I will give you 2 minutes to listen to read it on your own, and please think about how Henryk is saying, is talking, is describing his process of migrating. Enjoy reading. So this is what Henryk told Galasinska and Horowitz about his process of literally migrating, the process of getting on a plane, of saying farewell to his loved ones. Let's look at a narrative about the same topic, about traveling from Poland to the UK in order to migrate, produced by a migrant who moved to United Kingdom after 2004, Tadek. So as you can see, this narrative is shorter, but also as it's much less reflective. So here are two questions for you guys. How have those stories changed? We have two stories of two male migrants, not very much separated in time, but in different migration regimes. And why do you think they have changed? Think a little bit about this. Okay, so in this part, I would like to say about the economic situation of Poles in the UK. As you already know, Polish migrants in the UK are often highly skilled and have higher education. Those are graduates from Polish universities. So coming here often with no prior work experience, or with prior work experience but not being able to work in the same parts of the labor market, they face particularly low return on investment in education, even compared to other migrants. How we understand this low return on investment in education? Simply that the Polish salaries do not reflect the higher education. They do not reflect that they actually have are highly skilled, and this is not only when we compare the Polish migrants to the native to the natives, but also when we compare to Polish migrants with other migrants. Another author, Magdalena Nowicka, says that the Poles in the UK are suspended in inverted commas, that they live enough to live a comfortable life, more comfortable than they would in the country of origin, however, not enough to prepare a return to Poland. Also, because the patterns of consumption get different here, so that people are not able to save enough money to have a bigger amount and to invest back in Poland. And finally, the crisis of 2008 and 9 have forced decisions regarding plans to stay permanently here in the UK, to come back, but will they be able to survive? Why to stay permanently? As I already said at the beginning, the Polish migrants had this strategy of not having any strategy. However, when the crisis comes here to Britain, many of them were badly hit, lost their jobs, and saw themselves forced to change jobs, sometimes to worse paid than before. Or as they were not employed here in the UK, they considered moving back to Poland. However, sometimes those returns were not permanent neither, and this is something that we will look at in the fourth part of this session. Obviously, social scientists were looking for typologists and a way to classify. As I already said, following the EU accession, everybody migrated from Poland. Obviously, not everybody, but it was a very diverse group. So it's important to see what are different characteristics and different plans of people, and the authors that you can see on the slide, Iade, Drinkwater, and Garapich, name 4 groups of Polish migrants, saying about their strategies of regarding their migration, and they call them storks, hamsters, searchers, and salmons. Storks are the migrants who as this bird stork travel back and forth, and those are seasonal migrants who come to Britain in order to work when the season is high. They either work in the hospitality industry or they work in agriculture, and once they earn money, they go back to the country of origin, where they often have family or education plans. So these can be also university students who just come here for the 3 months of their summer holiday. The second group are hamsters, who come here with this very well-defined plan of earning enough money for whatever purpose they have in mind, not consuming much when in Britain, but to save money and return quickly to their places of origin, or at least country of origin if they decide to change place. So also from my own research that I have carried out among Polish migrants in the UK, I know that there are many different reasons that people decide to come here, save money, and return quickly, such as getting married and being able to pay for the wedding reception and all the other costs involved in getting married, or setting up a business, or building a house, or buying a property. The third group are searchers, those people who come with the strategy of not having any strategy, the people who have unclear plans. And this is the most numerous group. And finally, what the authors call salmons, people who come here in the UK to the UK and see their migration more as a long-term migration, more permanent migration, but not necessarily a settlement, because some of them make plans to return to the country of origin when they retire, especially if they reach retirement age and the necessary number of years worked here in the UK, and they can transfer their pensions back to the country of origin, when where they can permit good living standards and quality of life.